Ladies and gentlemen, get your notepad out, take notes, put the time when it was so you can go back and remember exactly uh, the time that was said. Because, ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something. It's the only place in the world you're going to find it. Whale Certified uh, Podcast has an official psychiatrist, Dr. Chuck Zorumski, ladies and gentlemen. Chuck, the doctor, and a goalkeeper to boot, baby.
All right, Kevin. Well, it's great to be here with you again. And we've had some interesting conversations over the last couple.
Yeah,
So it's a lot of fun to be here with you and just talk about stuff that goes on for players and life in general.
exactly. And I'm coming up on a an anniversary date of a trauma that ended into recovery, and it is so magnificent that the power of the mind. You know, it you feel like, oh my God, but if you have some ability, a fourth dimension, that it just gives you everything you would ever want and need, and you have that resource to always go back to. And we were talking about the season of the soccer season, and my whaleism, you don't. We've only talked for like 5 times, so you were thinking I was asking you about how to try out and how to analyze and review the player, and he said you've been out of the game for so long. I said, no, man, this is about when you get that either the word or your name on a list saying you've been cut. And we started this morning to say, I wrote down some things, is that a player who is cut for the first time in their life, they don't know nothing from nothing, and they got cut. And then the one that gets cut again, and then the one that got cut to keep a senior in. You always hear that story. Hey, you were right there, but he or she's a senior, and so you get cut, and that's it, man. You can't, there's no do over. And I was wondering if you would have like that for a little jocularity of a serious subject, like a Jack in a Box. When you open up the Jack in a Box with the caramel popcorn, and you open it up and you have that little book. And you still there, Chuck?
Yeah. Oh,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Kevin. Yeah.
All right. So you would have that little thing, and you would open up, and they would tell you how to do this or that. How to be the best detective in the neighborhood. And the whole idea was that, is there something that how does a kid or anyone at that time to say, hey, these are the things, a checklist, a to-do list, to when something major happens, or is it that evolution of that human spirit? Just you must have seen it a million times, and every time is an all. Uh, but how would you? Well, you have a boy.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've got two of them, and both of them were goalkeepers, and I've got a grandson who's trying to be a goalkeeper now at this point.
yeah,
So God, you raise so many important issues, Kevin, and it ends up being kind of about mental resilience as much as anything. And you kind of brought this up. And there's something in my field and the things that one of the adages that I kind of live by, which is there is no such thing as health without mental health. And the corollary to that is that if a human being has mental health, they can live with almost anything that happens to them. This is actually a kind of a quote from Nietzsche, actually, the philosopher, and that is the person who has a why can live with almost any how. And that's kind of the way life kind of goes. And so uh, the challenge of being cut, God, this is such an important conversation, and your experiences would be really important to hear about as well. But I can tell you, I ended up getting really recognized as a goalkeeper, and was really lucky to play on multiple national championships and other stuff like that, at the level of some of the national kinds of stuff. And everybody would say, well, God, you must have been just really selected to be, that kind of player. You must have just stood out. Well, the truth is, I didn't. The early part of my time as a player was about getting cut. As I mean, from baseball as a kid, the first team I ever tried out from, to being a freshman at high school at DeAndre's. You and I talked about the north side and growing up there. Well, I was a 5'4" freshman, and there was no JV or B team at DeAndre's high school. So you tried out for varsity. So a 5'4" freshman walks on the field with some of the best players out of the north side. Matter of fact, DeAndre's, when I was a freshman, won what was called the district championship that year, which was essentially the state championship. I mean, there were no real teams outside of St. Louis, frankly, kind of at that time in the state of Missouri. But so I go out for DeAndre's, and expecting that I might actually make the team. Well, I got cut, and I was kind of devastated by the whole thing. Matter of fact, I didn't go back out for high school soccer till I was a junior then, and
Wow.
had grown some. So, but the key for me was I kept playing. I hooked up with some guys in my freshman year of high school, and a club team and things like that. And we weren't really very good. We were a decent team, but we weren't one of the best teams in St. Louis. I mean, remember, St. Louis was loaded with incredible teams, kind of in that era. But it was keeping and continuing to play, and not getting devastated by the failure of making the team. And things that helped with that were one, just friends that I had, friends from soccer and friends in general who just didn't let you get down on yourself. So there's an important life lessons, which is pick your friends wisely. You want people who are interested in you doing well, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah.
And that really can help carry you through. So can your family, if your family is supportive. Now, not everybody has a supportive family, so sometimes that's kind of tough. But not getting down on yourself about how that kind of works. The other thing, and I'll quit babbling and hear
No.
what you want to talk about, Kevin. But the other thing that I am a big fan of is I hate channeling kids too soon into specialized kind of areas and things like that. And what I mean by that is, we select them. They're going to be an athlete. They're going to be a pro athlete by the time they're 10, 11 years old. For many of us as human beings, I think that's garbage, frankly. So like I said, I was a 5'4" freshman at DeAndre's high school, had no chance to make the varsity team. By the time I was a senior in high school, I was about 6 foot, which was a pretty good size for a goalkeeper, and life got easier kind of at that point. I was bigger, I was more physically mature, and then by the time I actually arrived as a player, which was in the St. Louis League when I was a 19-year-old, I was 6'3". So if you picked me when I was 12 years old, you'd have gone, forget it, kid, go away. You're never going to make it.
Yeah.
Well, all of a sudden I'm 19 years old and I'm 6'3", and all of a sudden I'm one of the biggest players on the field. And that made a huge difference. But it was hanging in there, if that makes sense to you. And we
Yeah.
can talk about stuff that may help that, as we go.
Well,
Yeah.
under full disclosure, ladies and gentlemen, when you were the senior at DeAndre's going into St. Louis University, and for a couple years afterwards, And as you start coaching, you were the area standard of excellence in goalkeeping. I just wanted you to know that I know that you know.
Well, Kevin, I really appreciate that. You know, and it's one of those things that some point you wake up and all of a sudden what you thought you might have an outside chance to do, all of a sudden you were it. I'm kind of reading. This is going to sound really crazy, but I'm a psychiatrist, so I talk about crazy stuff. Yeah, the Beatles, the great band, the Beatles, right?
Yeah.
They talked about in late 50s, early 60s, they were looking for the next big sound. What was that sound going to be? And then someday they woke up in 1962 and they were it,
Wow.
and that's kind of what you're describing with me on a much smaller scale, obviously, and
Yeah.
in a much more focused thing. But it was like all of a sudden people thought I could play, and I go, well, this is a joke. I could, I wasn't recruited out of high school, frankly. So nobody was recruiting me out of high school, even though I'd grown to about 6 foot. I went off to Forest Park Community College for several weeks. So that's a part of my career most people don't even know. I played like 3 or 4 games for Forest Park Community College before my sister realized I was like wasting my academic background, and so she's the one that yanked me over to go take an academic scholarship at St. Louis U. So I wasn't recruited, but I played soccer at Forest Park, and it changed my life. I met
Wow.
guys. Yeah, I met guys who recruited me to go play for the old St. Louis Kickers in the St. Louis League. So that's how I got into the St. Louis League, was because of the folks I met at Forest Park Community College, So, and then that led to a whole bunch of other positive things for me. Yeah. Out of that, I mean, and the only reason I'm telling the stories is because they're kind of boring, kind of in retrospect. But the only reason I'm telling them is for a kid, and usually if you're going to get cut from a team, it's a kid or an adolescent that's getting cut, right?
Right.
That's not what happens to you as you get to adulthood and you get further along. But it's devastating, and kids quit playing, and that just bothers me tremendously. That a kid is allowed to. It just happens to a kid, and how do you help those kids not get overwhelmed by what happened? So anyway, the long story short is I ended up at Forest Park. I play for the Kickers in the St. Louis League, and we're a mixture of mostly international players, folks from old Yugoslavia, Germany, Latin America. Those were some of the folks that recruited me to go play for the Kickers. The team was not good. I mean, I don't think we won a game in the St. Louis League that year. But I think you will like this. Out of that, Sal Noto from Stag recognized
Wow.
me as a player and recruited me to go. So all of a sudden, I wasn't trying out for stuff. Sal recruits me to come play for Stag Beer in the
Wow.
next year as a
Wow.
19-year-old. Uh,
Wow.
next thing I know, I'm playing with Eddie Clear, Lenny Betcher, the Meyer brothers who had been at DeAndre's,
Yeah.
multiple great players. Jack Deck, oh my God, there were so many great players. Many good players for Stag. We won the St. Louis League and were recognized as a team that was on the rise. And all of a sudden, my life got to where people thought I could actually play. It was,
Oh
it was a
yeah,
joke. It
man.
was a joke, Kevin. So anyway, I'll stop. But
Uh,
that's that's just how, if you hang in there and you find support around you, sometimes you get recognized at some point, and it really makes a difference. If that makes sense.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then when you walked into Pigatowski's sausage, they would say, "Hey, Chuck, here's a little slice. How you liking it?" Did they treat you a little differently?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't know about the Pikatowski folks, although we ate plenty of that, you
Yeah,
know. But those were actually guys from my high school. That was the old Sacred Heart area,
yeah.
Sacred Heart Parish down that way, that produced multiple. Matter of fact, that's how it was one of the Sacred Heart players that got me to play for St. Louis U as a junior. So I didn't play I was ineligible my freshman year because I had gone to Forest Park.
Yeah.
Sophomore year, I didn't even try out for SLU or just try to walk on the team. I went and played in the St. Louis League with Stag, but it was Dale Harmon who was a great player for SLU and for
Yeah.
DeAndres and Rosary High School for that matter. He's actually north side out of the inner city. So he was DeAndres first, Rosary High School, and then Forest Park Community College, and sorry, Flo Valley Community College, and then SLU for Dale. But Dale meets me and my girlfriend, who's now my wife. At the
Wow.
time, we were someplace with Dale, and he essentially recruits me to come try out for SLU and just walk on at SLU. Otherwise, I wasn't even planning to do that. And so, but
Wow.
those are the friends that you make along the way who sometimes realize you can play, and they kind of bring you along, even though you aren't of the level of those individuals. Certainly at that time, I was not. Dale was a star as far as I was concerned,
Oh,
and I was
yeah.
just some third-rate player, you know. So
Wow. Dale Armin, he was bigger than life, man. Had a great haircut and just was a monster. And
he was a monster in the central defense. You
yeah,
better
man.
believe it, man.
Yeah,
That's
man. I mean, geez, you talk about from a little C on confidence playing behind him goes big C. I got the big C. Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
all of a sudden we had this. Well, this when I got to SLU, all of a sudden we had Dale in the middle of the defense, Bruce Hudson in the middle of the defense, Mark Demling back there, Bob Madison. And so I'm playing with incredible players, most of whom went on to be pro of one form or another. And there I am, kind of in the mix with those guys. And man, what a great experience that turned out to be.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
Uh,
Yeah. And man, and so you could really go. You pick SLU or you pick any team that you're on. You are talking about over a handful of mental health resilient stories throughout every player. And what a resource to understand the cutting process from the team itself. Because we've all been there, man. You know?
yeah, absolutely. And it's just keep if you and this gets to the individual. You and I'm not the most confident individual on the planet, but you kind of believe in yourself that I think I can do this, and you keep working at the game, and then you get around coaches and other players who kind of then have a big impact on you. And there's actually I was thinking about this and kind of knew you and I'd be talking a bit about this today. But there's actually a book that was written maybe about 5, 6, 7 years ago by a Canadian psychologist and philosopher named Jordan Peterson. And the book is called 12 Rules for Life. And it's how to put order in your life out of the chaos that's around you. Getting cut from a team, losing, that's chaos in your life. And so Peterson's lessons, his 12 rules for life, are about how to establish chaos, how to establish order kind of within your life, so that you put yourself in a position to be as successful as you can be. So where I'm going with this is one of Peterson's rules is, and I hear people moaning and complaining about their coaches and what the coaches are saying, and even other players around them and what they're saying. One of Peterson's rules for life that I believe very strongly is listen to the other person. They may know something you don't know. And man, you can learn a ton from listening to people. Even if you don't like the way sometimes they tell you the message, you learn stuff from those individuals that make you better at what you're doing. Generally better, not just at soccer or other things like that, but more generally and prepared for life. But that's a rule for life that I actually like a lot. It's,
Wow.
yeah. Another of Peterson's rules is uh, take responsibility for what you do. So if I got cut or I got beat in games, I just took. I mean, it was hard, and the first thing you want to do is point the finger and go, oh man, it's not my fault. It was blah 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 blah. And so it was just bad circumstances. Well, that only carries you so far. But as Peterson would say, take responsibility for what you do and how it impacts what the outcome that you got is. And as you think about it carefully, you realize there's stuff I could have done better. There's stuff I should have done better, and then you don't beat yourself up with it, but you learn from it and you learn from that experience. And again, I think this is relevant to that whole getting cut kind of discussion, Kevin.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, man. I'm holy cow. I wish I could collect my thoughts right now. I would have a book.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, but you know, and again, I emphasize I didn't play. DeAndre's High School was a great program, but by the time I was a junior and senior, it had fallen apart. The city had changed dramatically,
Yeah.
so people had flown from the city. So we lost. God, I one time I counted 15 to 20 quality players who left DeAndre's High School during my time that I was there, but still weren't done with high school, or they were ineligible to play for the high school. So DeAndre's was kind of a okay, but not really that good of a team by the time I was a senior in high school. And it was only by the time I hit the age of 19 that I actually played on a team that was pretty good. That was Stag with Sal Noto.
Oh,
And so
yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and I know you resonate with that because I from other conversation, I know you've played for Stag. Matter of fact, I remember you playing for
Yeah.
Stag. Yeah.
Yeah. And I always wanted to play a night game in at Fairgrounds Park that legendary Stag used to play, and it was an event. It was like going to an event, man, when you watch you guys play.
Yeah, well, Kevin, I grew up and lived until I was in my mid 20s and out of medical school. I lived a half a block from Fairgrounds Park. I could walk to practice. Not that I would advise anybody in the late 60s and 70s to ever walk to Fairgrounds Park
Yeah.
because it was bad then and it's way worse now. But you're right. Those Matter of fact, those games had big impacts on me when I was a kid watching Kudus, the Kickers, Crondelet, multiple teams that were White Star back in its era. I mean, watching them at Fairgrounds Park had a big impact on me as a kid and saying, I want to be like those guys. I want to be able to play like they're capable of playing.
Yeah.
And that kind of keeps you going even when you fail.
Yeah. They had so many multiple fields that, depending upon what level of the play or the time of you would play at a certain on a certain field, sometimes in the daytime, but it only seemed the top game of the year or that league, Stag, could play under the lights on one of those fairground fields.
Diamond One at Fairgrounds Park.
Oh, man.
Diamond One, which was right off Kossuth, which is the street I grew up on.
Yeah,
Uh,
baby.
Diamond One was a phenom. Great games of the St. Louis, whatever the St. Louis League was called at that time.
Yeah.
Not only that, but St. Louis U never really had a home field in that era, even though they were winning national championships. They played their home games at Fairgrounds Park number one.
Wow.
And I, those street kids like we would sneak into the games under the tarpolium, and go
Yeah.
watch SLU play. And it was that had a big. Carl Gentili, Pat McBride,
Wow.
those
All of them.
those those
All
guys.
of them.
Roger Rupp playing goal for them. Wearing all black. I mean, that had a big.
Wow.
So I wore black because
Yeah,
Roger
you
Rupp
did.
wore black.
Oh,
Yeah. And
man.
Sepmeyer in Germany wore black too, and that had a big
Absolutely.
impact on me. So yeah. So this is. I guess the message in the kids who get cut is, man, just don't get down about it. Believe in yourself and develop that confidence with good friends around you. But be careful of the friends who drag you down. Because
Yeah.
there are folks who then go, well, you're just a piece of junk. You're never going to be a player, and there's no chance you're ever going to make it. Well, you don't need to hear that lesson. You need to be around people who lift you and make you think about yourself in a better way. And God, that's some of the people I've been around. Yeah.
Yeah. And say for instance, I had that story of talking to myself a lot, and I I asked some input on it, and they said, "Well, it's not so bad, Wales, unless you answer yourself. That's that's when you got some problems." But but the idea was, looking in the mirror, and after you get this and that, you say, "Hey," and you start to become a friend to yourself, so that you can be a good friend to others.
That is a beautiful statement, Kevin. That is one of Peterson's 12 rules for life. Uh,
Oh,
and yeah, I'm dead serious. And
yeah, yeah, yeah.
the rule from Peterson goes something like, treat yourself like you're somebody you're trying to help. Does that sound familiar? So,
Oh
so
boy,
you are
yeah.
trying to advise yourself to do what. Now, so it's easy for me to tell somebody who's had something bad happen to them, man, we're gonna work on this. We're gonna try to help you do the best you can and all that. But we don't do that to ourselves a lot of the time. We treat ourselves like we're pieces of dung, right?
Oh,
That there's something bad about us. But the truth is, if you treat yourself like somebody you're trying to help, you think about things differently. That is one of Jordan Peterson's 12 rules for life. I'm not trying to sell his book, by the way, but because I don't even know Jordan Peterson. And so,
well, if you ever meet up with him, please tell him well certified. Would love to have a couple, set episodes with him.
absolutely, yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
my gosh, isn't that beautiful? And I, it always goes back to where I think my mother told me this. My mother nourished me about this. The Sisters of Saint Joseph, or just sitting on the corner. That you wanted to be one of the temptations, but you're a white guy in the you know, and on the north side, you ain't gonna get discovered, son. You know,
That's right.
yeah. And but that whole ideal is that isn't that beautiful? Is that there is a way out, a real way out for everyone, and I would hope that somehow, it always pained me to always say, you can't say those things to those kids. You can't, no cut policy. You can't you can't keep life from a young man, a woman. They have to the chaos. They come out. They rise up from all of that, and obviously there's a kinder, softer way to give the cut, but you got to give the cut, man. You know. And,
Kevin, I think that is so true. And I know there's a philosophy of raising kids and helping people be the best that they can that says never cut anybody. Uh, Everybody gets a trophy for playing. I I don't think that's what makes you into a resilient, tough human being, frankly. And believe me, my view of it is, and maybe it's because I grew up in the North Side. My view is life is brutal, man. It is tough,
yeah.
and if you don't develop the toughness to live the life, you know, again, you don't want kids hanging in the balance and feeling like, oh man, it's never going to work out. It can all work out, and you have to keep providing that message. But you're not always going to win. This was one of our conversations, was picking the ball out of the back of the net when you get scored on. Right?
Yeah.
It's one of the most humiliating and irritating things that I ever had to do, right?
Yeah.
Uh, but I did it, and I used it to make me harder in my mind about how we were going to play and how I was going to play in that. And that's a lesson that translates from not just from the soccer field, but it translates across almost everything we do, because life is tough, man. It's yeah, and everybody's not going to give you a trophy for everything you do, And so,
Yeah. And even now in retirement, I had my older brother say, "Hey, when are you going to get a job? Oh, isn't he a beaut? And my brother, he's a beaut. I said, what are you talking about? And he,
Hey,
and
man, you got a job, whale certified. What are they talking
oh,
about?
well, unbeknownst, we got to get if we're on solid mental health here, is that I'm thinking, well, this is how I'm going to get my job. I, people ain't calling the well to say, hey, I got a job for you. And so I'm trying to network to get out to get a job, to have a career, cottage industry type of thing.
Yeah.
And that I was told in the podcast, kind of association, they say, kid, concentrate on the content. Now they they said, after the first 100 or so, I'm at 375 and I'm still concentrating. And
Yeah.
yeah, and the whole idea is with the the stats. I am very top 1% of stats in a confined, focused area of deal. That people, and like you saying, Chuck, I'm listening to you, Wales, and you got these people on, and they say this is invaluable, really entertaining and informative, and I'm saying, holy moly, that there's a possibility here, and that's how I got my job. Is that I was around like I was working, and, and people assume they didn't know I was from get out of bed to hit the couch or to hit the lounge chair, and that was my life. But I acted as if I was a worker bee from the morning, and they reached out, and there I was. I got a job.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
yeah. And it was all because of soccer is saying that, hey, unless you tell yourself in the mirror, you ain't no good, you ain't going to be nothing, you got a chance in that gold when your teammates are saying, come on. And, you got that opponent wants to score on you and they're laughing at you thinking you're not so good. You got to really make it right at that time. And so once you start doing that, people really enjoy how you play, and they think that you're a whole different type of person because of how you play in that moment. And the last thing, that guy, I'm going to track that guy down. I hope he's okay. The man in black at Fairgrounds Park, man, the goalkeeper in black. I mean, there's nothing better, and only the top keepers. You had to be very confident to wear black.
Yeah, it made me look mean.
Yeah,
So,
baby.
I kind of like that.
Yeah.
One time a kid, and I'm going to come back to some of the things you said because you said several really important things that I want to pick up on. But one time, I was over 30 at this point, playing for Budweiser and stuff, and I'd still wear almost all black. Including longer pants because I had a knee injury, so I didn't want anybody to know I had a brace on one of my knees, so I had kind of quasi sweatpants on and things. And kid comes up and he says, man, he says, it's 90 some odd degrees out there. He says, doesn't wearing all black make you hot? And the answer I gave my wife was there, and she still gives me crap about this. I go, it doesn't make me hot. it makes me mad. You know, and that's how I played, you know, with under that kind of controlled state of rage kind
Yeah,
of thing, you
yeah,
know. And so
yeah.
people say, well, this has been an intellectual exercise, you know, playing goal and things. It had nothing to do with that, man. It was about were you tough enough to stay on that field and play the game. And that's kind of what you're describing as well, Kevin, as you talk about setting up doing whale certified and the things you're doing. But there are two things that you said that I think that really resonate with me. The first one is soccer as a network, a social network, a positive social network. And as I listen to podcasts that you do, I'm like blown away because I think about how broad, just in St. Louis, in this region, the soccer network is, and how many successful people have come out of that network. And God, you know, I wouldn't embarrass them by naming
Yeah.
a fraction of them. But they're all successes, man. They're amazing, and they care about what happens to others in the network, right? You know,
Yeah.
and sometimes they're the folks who can make a connection for you to one thing or another that you weren't even expecting. That's kind of how social networks actually function. So I think that's a really important point that you made. And the second one you made that I took out of what you were describing is not only don't quit, but you keep pitching, because there's an old adage, and Denny Vanager used to say this all the time when we were playing for Budweiser, was you're only as good as your last game, you know. And yeah, and so every time you walk on the field, it's another game, and you've got a chance for something to happen and things. Like I said, you know, the getting recognized by Sal Noto was Fairgrounds Park number 2 as a playing for the St. Louis Kickers. We were playing one of the top teams in the league, Bilgier Chevrolet, who had a goalkeeper named Jack Bell, who had been on the Olympic team in '72. Great team, way better than the Kickers, but I shut them out in the first half. And the plan was always that the other guy was going to play goal in the second half, and I was never bothered by that. That was all okay. Well, Sal Noto goes nuts about me coming out of the game, and I'm standing there on the sidelines, and he's railing on the coach of the Kickers about how can you take this kid out of playing goal and stuff like that. Next thing I know, Sal's talking to me. He says, "You got to come play for us next year." And things.
Wow.
So it also the lesson out of that is you never know who's paying attention to what you do, and where they're paying attention to it, and sometimes that opens doors that you never expected to open, you
Yeah,
know. and
yeah, yeah.
and that's the soccer network. Yeah,
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 you go. Wow, man. Man, that's does my heart feel good. I only knew Sal Noda from afar, a legendary status type of thing. But you know, you hear stories, and when you're on the north side, hearing stories about the north siders, you're like, yeah, I know the guy. Yeah, you know, I,
yeah.
you know, and like out, we would pass on Fairgrounds Park, and Sal Noto never noticed me. You know, and we he was like,
Absolutely
yeah,
right.
yeah. But what a man, just you know, Sal Noto, and then there's so many others, and you know, how when you're great, how level of a hey, you're only 9/10 great. You know, I mean, you're only .2 great. It's you when you're great, you're great.
Yeah,
And so he comes under the heading of all the greats of St. Louis soccer, as well, like you mentioned, all those players, and
yeah.
that you don't feel, oh, I'm not that good like them. No, and they tell you, the great players like yourself tell other players, hey, I seen you play, man. You're pretty great.
Absolutely. And you know, that is so important. And it's also one of a thing that a kid who gets cut or a teenager gets cut from a team, you start comparing yourself to others, you know. And again, this is out of Peterson's 12 rules, which is don't compare yourself to other people. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday, and can you get better at what you do? And the lesson out of this is that uh, we're not going to be the greatest players on the planet, right? There's always players who are way better than anything you ever thought you could do. It's true in medicine, it's true in science, it's true in everything that I've done. There are way better people, but if you start comparing yourself to those, you start feeling demoralized sometimes by it, like, oh man, I should have done blah blah blah, and God, how could I have screwed that up and stuff. But if you're continuing to see yourself as a human being who's improving and working on yourself, you can do a whole lot of good. There's a corollary to this, which is the higher the level you play, the more you're going to learn you're not the best player, and you're probably never going to be the best player. This, and we can take this out of soccer. This is a lesson from going to college or going to medical school, for example. So medical school is an interesting thing. So you got a class of maybe 150 individuals, all young adults who've been through college and everything. Every one of them has ranked at the top of their college, usually their high school and their college their classes that they were in. They rank at the very top. Well, they get to medical school and not only mediocre to lower part of the class, right? And man, that's devastating. You go, God, I thought I was smarter than this, and
Yeah.
then you realize there are just folks who are just different than you. But that doesn't mean you can't be great in your own sphere. And that's a massive lesson of life for a kid who's been cut, in that you will find the niche if you keep pitching. And that's embedded in what you were describing as well. Just keep pitching and playing, and you will find the niche. And that's my personal opinion. Yeah.
Oh man, that's absolutely beautiful. Well, I think we accomplished something this morning. This is, if not the best, it's one of the best uh, podcasts ever. And so here I am, uh, uh, taking that customary story of Dr. Charles Zorumski, whatever you want to say to who you ever want to say it to, for as long as you want to say it for.
Wow. Well, Kevin, this is really a beautiful thing you do at the end of each show, and I really appreciate it. And in the first times I've met you, I didn't know, so I was just kind of like babbling stuff off the top of my head. But what you raised about this issue of being cut and finding a way to success out of the adversity is really important. And I hope what we've talked about today helps somebody along the way. But if I were to pick people in my life that made a big difference like that, beyond my wife, who like carried me through so many times when I was in the doldrums, when I was like, I kind of like didn't think there was a path out and whatnot. But they were coaches, and I mentioned Sal Noto. Sal would be in my Hall of Fame because of what he did for me, period. And no questions asked. And I learned so much from that experience that it helped to make me into whatever kind of player I became. I had a coach in high school. I was just thinking about this the other day, who actually had a huge impact on me. And I don't know, the guy had played at Benedictine. His name was Randy Musgrove. And I've never thanked Randy for what he did when he came in as a senior when I was a senior at DeAndrews. He's the one who got me to quit walking on the field for games like I was in la la land, like la 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 la, we're just going to play the game. It was like, focus. Before you walk on the field, know what you expect of yourself and what you're going to do. So that made a big difference, because then I never walked on the field again without being mentally prepared to step on the field and play the game. So that was a guy that most people probably never even heard of, but had a huge impact on me. And then of course there was Harry Keogh and Val Pellizzero at SLU, who were probably two of the not only greatest players in St. Louis soccer history, but two of the greatest coaches in St. Louis soccer history. And their impact on me was just enormous in giving me a chance to play and things like that. Matter of fact, Kevin, not to babble, but the first road trip with SLU that they were taking was a trip to the West Coast, through Colorado, Washington, San Francisco, playing big teams, big games. And at that point, we had only played maybe 2 or 3 games for SLU, and we were splitting time as goalkeepers. So I wasn't sure I was the starting goalkeeper or anything like that. Harry told the players who weren't going on the trip that they weren't going, but he never talked to a player like me, thinking I knew I was supposed to be going. I didn't. I went to class the morning the flight was leaving for Colorado, and it was Tom Pellizzero who saw me at class and says, "Man, you're supposed to be getting on the plane. You guys, we're leaving in about an hour and a half." And I go, "Really? Am I supposed to go?" so it was that's how unsure I was whether I was actually a player or not, kind of at that point. But Harry and Val carried me through all that. Then I had Miguel de Lima, the Brazilian national team in St. Louis Stars goalkeeper, that was almost a personal mentor to me for the 2 years I played at SLU. That changed my life dramatically and made me into a real player. So I am eternally grateful to Miguel for having been around him as a human being, as a gentleman, and as a great thinker about the game of soccer and life in general. So anyway, Kevin, those are folks who had huge impacts on me and carried me through the adversity that might otherwise devastate you at various times.
That's right, man. So, woo, man, I tell you. So, you're well certified Hall of Affinity, Dr. Chuck Zorumski. You got
that is great. I heard you say that to Ruth Harker yesterday. It must have been. Man, I thought that was great about the Gettemeyer twins.
Yeah, and man.
Yeah. That is just awesome.
Yeah, man. So there you are, and you know, almost anybody can be well certified if they try. So we're on our way here.
And that's right. Nobody gets cut from whale certified.
Hey, baby! All right, man. Thank you, Doctor. Right. Thank you, Doctor. Thank you. So I'll upload it and send it to you, and then the missus will enjoy it. She'll be.
Amen,
proud.
Kevin. Have a great weekend and keep pitching, brother. It's okay.
All right, then. Bye-bye.
Talk to you later.